Can't make me doubt him. I know too much about him. Matthew chapter 28, and commencing our reading at verse 10, the New International Version delineates these words. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid, but go and tell my brothers to meet me in Galilee." Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid, but go and tell my brothers to meet me in Galilee." And Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid." If you read in the King James Version, it says, "Fear not, but tell my brothers to meet me in Galilee." And Jesus said to them, "Fear not, but go and tell my brothers to meet me in Galilee." And Jesus said to them, "Fear not, but go and tell my brothers to meet me in Galilee." If we can, for the next few brief moments, maybe about 13 and a half minutes, we want to attempt to preach from this very simple subject: don't let evil win. Don't let evil win. Consecrate me now to thy service, Lord, by the power of grace divine. And dear Lord, let my soul look up with a steadfast hope. And Lord, let my will be lost in thine. Dear Lord, help me preach. In Jesus' name, amen. Matthew chapter 27 and 28 records the state-sanctioned execution, death, and burial of Jesus Christ. Now, I doubt that I need to tell this room that when someone loses someone close to them, it often releases an unpredictable cluster of emotions such as fear and anxiousness, terror, and bewilderment. Whenever someone loses someone that they love, it often releases a wave of emotions that causes us to behave in manners that are not characteristic of ourselves. Because of this very simple truth, it's not hard to believe that the disciples are now experiencing an unpredictable cluster of emotions. And like John's gospel says, it's not hard to believe that they are hidden behind closed doors because of fear. In truth, I think this is one of the main reasons that Jesus is executed on a cross. The Jewish leadership and the Roman Empire wanted to instill fear in Jesus's followers. Because the Jewish leadership and Roman Empire wanted to strike terror in Jesus's disciples so that his disciples would not follow in his footsteps. His disciples, the Jewish leadership and Roman Empire, killed Jesus on a cross. Matter of fact, in the book Jesus of Nazareth, author Paula Fredrickson states it like this: crucifixion was a Roman form of a public service announcement. Do not participate in the behavior this person has, or else you will die just like this too. The point of the exercise was not the death of the offender as such, but to muster the attention of those in the audience. Crucifixion, first and foremost, is addressed to an audience. End quote. Jesus is executed on a cross in order to strike fear in his disciples. Jesus is stripped of his clothes, forced to wear a crown of thorns on his head, nailed between two thieves, and executed in front of a frantic mob in order to strike terror in his followers. Jesus is beaten and bruised and humiliated and hurt and stabbed and spit upon just to terrorize his disciples. So it's no surprise that the very first statement of the resurrected Jesus, the very first statement that Jesus makes to his disciples who are hidden behind closed doors because of fear, it's no surprise that his first statement is fear not. In the same manner, I've come to tell the people in this room on this resurrection morn the exact same words that Jesus told to his disciples. I've come to tell you, fear not. I know that the murders of Stephon Clark and Philando Castile and Freddie Gray and Amadou Diallo and Tamir Rice and others at the hands of law enforcement makes some of us wonder every time a cop car comes back if we're next. But fear not. I know the acquittal of officers who beat or murdered Alton Spearlin, Sandra Bland, Oscar Grant, Trayvon Mothers, and others without justification or provocation. Officers who were not held accountable for their crimes make some of us wonder if this will ever end. But fear not. I know the fact that racists have murdered us in our churches, murdered us in toy stores, murdered us in the street, and have now even murdered us in our own backyard, makes some of us want to bolt our doors and never come back out, but fear not. I know that when it rains, it pours. When one problem hits, it seems like other problems come in rapid succession. I know that when one thing happens, another thing happens. I know that it makes some of us want to pull the covers over our head, shut off our phone, close the door, and not be bothered. But I've come to tell somebody, fear not. Fear not, because whenever we succumb to our fears, that means that the cross has won. Fear not, because whenever we bow down to our fears, that means that our enemies have won. When we become prisoners in our own house, that means our enemies have won. Whenever we create boundaries between ourselves and others, that means that our enemies have won. Whenever we're scared to open up our mouths, that means that our enemies have won. Whenever we bow down to our fears, that means our enemies have won. But can I tell somebody up in this room today that the empty grave proves that Jesus is alive and our enemies have not won? Jesus' enemies, they plotted, they conspired in order to have Jesus arrested. Jesus' enemies find false witnesses to accuse Jesus of crimes that Jesus did not commit. Jesus' enemies sentenced Jesus to public execution on an old rugged cross without even a fair trial. Jesus' enemies forced Jesus to wear a crown of thorn on his head. Jesus' enemies nailed Jesus between two thieves. Jesus' enemies watched Jesus breathe his last breath and shout, "It is finished." Jesus' enemies watched Jesus hang his head and die. Jesus' enemies watched Jesus be put into an old borrowed tomb. I know it sure enough looks like Jesus' enemies have won, but I've come to tell somebody that when Jesus resurrected from the dead, Jesus canceled the verdict of our enemies, and Jesus proved that our enemies have no power. And in the same manner, I just come to tell somebody up in this room on today that our enemies have no power. Our enemies have no authority. Our enemies have no dominion. And is there anybody here that's just glad about it? Glad that our enemies have no power because he won. Well, the first statement of the resurrected Jesus, the first statement that he makes to his disciples that are locked behind closed doors, the first statement that he makes to his disciples that are filled with a cluster of emotions, the first statement that he makes to his disciples is fear not. But please notice that Jesus then tells the women to go and tell his brothers to meet him in Galilee. Jesus tells the women to share with his brothers what the women have seen for themselves. Jesus tells the women to go tell the brothers not what they heard, but tell the women what they have seen with their own two eyes. And can I just tell someone in this room that whenever we have an encounter with the resurrected Jesus, then our next job is to help someone else have an encounter with Jesus too. And I simply mean to tell somebody that if the Lord has blessed you, then you ought to tell someone else. If the Lord has redeemed you, then you ought to tell someone else. If the Lord has dried your tears, then you ought to tell someone else. If the Lord has broken your addiction, then you ought to tell someone else. If the Lord picked you up and turned you around, then you ought to tell someone else. If the Lord has made a difference in your life, then you ought to tell someone else. For if we have an encounter with the resurrected Jesus, then we should help someone else have an encounter with Jesus Christ too. So I just wonder, are there some people up in this room today that know for themselves that they have had an encounter with the resurrected Jesus? Is there anybody up in this room on today that know that you were lost but the Lord found you? Is there anybody in this room today that know that you were sick but the Lord healed you? Is there anybody up in here today that knows that you were crazy but the Lord touched your mind? Is there anybody here today that was sinking deep in sin but the Lord picked you up? Is there anybody here today that didn't have a dime to your name but somehow the Lord fed you? The Lord kept food on the table. The Lord kept a roof on your head. Is there anybody up in this room today that can just testify that the Lord has made a difference in my life? Can you testify that the Lord has picked me up? Can you testify that the Lord has turned me around? Can you testify that the Lord has made a way? Then you ought to open up your mouth and bless his name. Praise him because he picked you up. Praise him because he turned you around. Anybody got a praise on your lips? Has the Lord been good? Has the Lord blessed you? Then you ought to bless his name. Then you ought to bless his name. Then you ought to bless his name. Hold on, do me a favor, because I need you to help me preach this sermon. I need you to find somebody around you, and I want you to open up your mouth and tell them what the Lord has done for you. Tell them about the ways that the Lord made. Tell them about the doors that the Lord opened. Tell them how the Lord healed your body. Tell them. Come on, open up your mouth. Tell them what the Lord has done. Tell them what the Lord has done. Tell them what the Lord has done. Because if he could do it for me, then he can do it for you. If the Lord made a way for me, the Lord can make a way for you. There is no secret to what God can do. For what is done for others, God can do for you. Shout it! Come on, stand up on your feet. And if the Lord did it, then you ought to bless his name. I said bless his name. Not bless my name, bless his name. For I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall be in my mouth. For if he did it before, he's more than able to do it again. I think that's why I love coming to church. Because when I get stuck in my own stuff, I can look around and see people that had a whole lot worse than me. But somehow they're still here by the grace of God. And if the Lord can work it out for them, then I know that the Lord is able to work it out for me. Matter of fact, look around the room. Just look around, 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 look around. Because I want you to see what a miracle looks like. I want you to see what a miracle looks like. I want you to see some people that have been through the fire, been through the flood, but they're still here by the grace of God. I want you to see some people that have taken some lickings, but they keep on ticking. I want you to see some people that can tell you what the Lord has done for them. And if the Lord can do it for them, God is more than able to do it for you. You know what I love about this text? I love that Jesus told the women, go tell my brothers. I mean, these were the same disciples that deserted Jesus when Jesus needed them at the cross. These were the same disciples that denied Jesus 3 times. These are the same disciples that acted like they did not know Jesus. But when Jesus got up from the grave, he said, go tell my brothers. If the truth is told, there's a whole lot of us that act like we don't know him. A whole lot of us who deny him. Whole lot of us who pretend like we never heard about him. But I'm so glad that when he got up from the grave, he still called us brothers. I'm so glad that when he got up from the grave, he still said, you're my sister. I'm so glad that when he got up from the grave, he still claimed us as our own. I just need to tell someone, no matter what you've done, no matter where you've been, no matter who you've been with, no matter who you woke up in the morning and didn't even know who they are, God still claims us. You're still his. He still loves you. 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 I know some other people have walked out of your life. I know some other people have got fed up with you and put you down and stopped messing with you. But he still loves you. If you're here today